Just be very, very careful when you see an 18-wheeler and just stay as far away from it as you can.
Hello, everyone. I'm Leslie Rohde with AskTheLawyers.com, and welcome to another episode of Ask the Lawyers. Well, today we're focusing on accidents caused by truck drivers. This after a truck driver was arrested recently in San Antonio in a hit-and-run fatal crash involving a car, and a woman was killed in this. We're talking today to attorney Greg Herrman from the law offices of Herrman Herrman in Corpus Christi. Greg, thanks for being here as always.
Sure. Thank you, Leslie.
Greg, this was a really sad case. That truck driver in the case was charged with failure to stop and render aid, resulting in death. Do hit and runs with truck drivers happen often in your knowledge?
You know, they happen, but it's usually kind of like what this guy described as, oh, I felt a bump or I felt something. And so I kept going, or I thought it was a dog or, whatever. Very rarely do you see one where somebody has this kind of collision that kills somebody and then they keep going. But, it does happen. Truck drivers are afraid of losing their CDL. They're afraid of criminal charges. And so lots of times they just keep going. And especially with minor accidents. Yeah, they just keep going and pretend, oh, I didn't even feel anything, or I just barely felt something. I thought it was a bump in the road, or, so yeah, you do see that quite a bit.
Is there video or dash cam footage in a truck?
There are, not always. We had a case out in California where luckily there was a video and it showed everything, and it was really good for us. And luckily we got a TRO out there, got it preserved before they could destroy it or, film over it or whatever. But you'd be surprised. Many trucking companies do not have cameras. I would say the vast majority, probably 80% don't have cameras. But hopefully it's becoming more and more industry standard where they have one.
So that's the trucking company's responsibility or choice whether to put that camera in there.
Yeah, it's really a choice. There's nobody mandating them to do it. So it's going to be up to each individual trucking company.
Let's talk about the difference between a truck driver being responsible or the trucking company. When something like this happens, ultimately, is the truck driver responsible or is the company held responsible?
Well, it's usually both, and it depends on the situation. First of all, any driver, any vehicle is always responsible for their own negligence. So, if this guy was negligent in hitting the parked car, that's one thing. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. Maybe she was in the middle of the road, and there was something, that prevented him from seeing her. But certainly leaving the scene, now that's a whole different deal. That's a criminal act. And so he's got to be responsible for his own criminal act. Generally, if he is an employee, now not all truck drivers are employees of the company. They're just hauling, some of them can be, independent contractors, and they're just hauling the truck for another company. They've got their own truck. Some of them even have their own company. And all they're doing is just hauling the freight. But if it's a true employer-employee relationship, then there's something in the law called respondeat superior, which basically means you as the superior are responsible for any actions of your employees, unless, they are outside the scope of your work. Like in this case, apparently after the guy had the hit and run, he left scene of the accident. Now, the employer, I think, would argue, hey, we didn't tell him to, keep running and don't stop and render aid. That was his choice. We can't be responsible for people making individual criminal decisions. However, in this case, the guy said, well, the company told me to lie, and the company told me to say I wasn't driving. The company told me to say I was sleeping. So if they really were doing that and telling him, don't cooperate and lie, then they're certainly liable, for punitive damages too, and for his conduct of doing that, and probably criminally too. Again, I don't know what the criminal law is on that, but oh yeah, if those are the true facts of the case. Now, I think the company's denying that, but of course, you'd expect the company to deny it.
Yeah, a lot to sort out in this case, for sure.
Yeah.
Still to come. So we'll know more about that. How do companies train? I know you have a lot of experience with cases involving truck drivers. Do you find that truck companies, train their drivers enough?
Yeah, generally no. Some fly-by-night companies, they just say, "Hey, you got your CDL? There you go. You got your training." Other companies have very, very intensive training, and they're constantly drilling safety and drilling how to check your rig to make sure everything's okay on it, and how to check the brakes and the hydraulics and just everything. And then the vast majority of companies fall somewhere in between, and they have a few safety meetings. They may make people come sign up, and so they can prove they were there, or at least that they signed in. And that's about it. And so we've even caught some where they don't even have the meeting. They just say, "Here, sign here, saying you had the meeting," and go about your way. So it's just a smorgasbord of types of training that's out there.
And I know with your experience, you have seen that smorgasbord, but why do you think it's so important for the companies to provide this extensive training?
Well, because, they're driving around with these 80,000 pound rigs, and, a lot of them speed, a lot of them take drugs, a lot of them drink, a lot of them don't get the required amount of sleep or required amount of rest. And, when they run into somebody, they're going to either seriously injure them or kill them. And if the brakes aren't working, or if there's some other safety defect that they haven't checked before they left, and you have an accident, again, bad things are going to happen. You're gonna hurt somebody bad, or you're going to kill somebody. And so, at least to me, when I'm driving down the road and I see an 18-wheeler, I'm very, very careful. I'm like, I need to get around this guy or stay behind him. But, I don't know what kind of training he's got. I don't know what kind of impairment he's got. I don't know whether he slept enough. I don't know whether they even loaded the trailer right. What if the load shifts and the thing tips over on me? There's just so many things that can go wrong that, that's why training is very, very, very important.
I can imagine, with all of your knowledge and experience with these cases, you do view truck drivers differently when you get out there on the road with them, unlike all of us, for sure. So with your experience in the cases, Greg, do you find the drivers more responsible, or the companies mostly responsible, or is it an even mix?
Again, like I said, everybody's always responsible for their own negligence. So the driver's almost always going to be at fault, unless, let's say, somebody else loaded the trailer or something for him, and it wasn't his job responsibility to check it. Now, usually he is supposed to check it anyway. But for some reason, if it wasn't his duty or something, and it was a misloaded trailer, or, let's say a company safety guy checked the brakes supposedly and checked the tires and did all that. Unless it's some kind of circumstance like that, but you're trained when you get your CDL, you're still supposed to go check your rig and make sure everything's safe on it. But 99% of the time, the driver's going to be at least somewhat at fault. And then the company is going to be responsible under the theory of respondeat superior, assuming they're an employer. The question is if the employee's conduct rises to the level of gross negligence, where you can get punitive damages, or to the level of a crime, can the company then be held liable for that? And, that just depends on the facts and what they knew, and whether they ratify his actions. And let's say he's committed this infraction before, and they keep letting him get away with it. Well, that's the same thing as adopting his actions and saying that's okay to do. So in that situation, they would be responsible.
What do you think is the most prevalent problem out there for truck drivers getting in these accidents?
Probably fatigue. Probably because of the way they're paid to, by the load and how fast they get the load there. And they're supposed to keep accurate logbooks. In the old days, they'd keep them on a piece of paper and an actual logbook. Now they usually keep them on an app on their phone. But the Department of Transportation regulates how many hours of sleep they're supposed to get, how many hours of rest they're supposed to get, what's the most amount of time they can drive without stopping. And we just see a lot of truck drivers that are not doing what they're supposed to do. And it's probably the number one factor is fatigue of the driver trying to get in every last, he's got to make sure he gets every amount of legal time he can get in. But then a lot of them go beyond that and say, well, another 30 minutes isn't going to hurt, or, another hour isn't going to hurt. So, but it's probably fatigue. And one other thing is nowadays, texting and driving too. Lots of truck drivers have a company issued phone and they have their own personal phone. And a lot of them, believe it or not, they'll check on Facebook and stuff while they're driving, or they'll be texting their family at home or a girlfriend or whatever. And so that's right up there too with fatigue, is distracted driving on the part of the truck driver, which is usually something like, a text or social media or something on their phone.
Anything you want to leave with drivers on the other side, maybe vehicles, those of us driving cars, to know about truck drivers, or how to drive out on the highways, interstates with truck drivers?
Yeah, the main thing is, especially with a full load, it takes a long, long time for them to stop. And so almost like a train, a train can apply the brakes and, it's still going to go for a mile. Now, a truck's not going to go that far, but depending on how much weight it's carrying, it could take that truck driver a long time to slam on his brakes. And even then, you don't really want him slamming on the brakes, because then maybe he's going to jackknife or something and cause even more problems. But, the best thing to do, what I do is I just try to stay out of the way. And if I see one speeding and come up behind me, I just move out of the way and I let them go. And I just try to stay way behind the guy. Now, occasionally there's one that's, driving the speed limit, and, maybe I want to go a little bit faster speed limit. I'll just go ahead and pass the guy up so I can make sure that I'm not driving right next to him. Because again, you don't know about the load, you don't know about his tires, you don't know about his brakes, you don't know about his condition. So, just be very, very careful when you see an 18-wheeler and just stay as far away from him as you can.
Great advice for all of us, those of us on the roadways. Greg Herrman, Herrman and Herrman in Corpus Christi. Always good to talk to you, Greg. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Leslie.
I want to remind everybody to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you won't miss another episode of Ask the Lawyers. I'm Leslie Rohde for AskTheLawyers.com, where you can choose a lawyer that lawyers choose.